I'm Beverly Reid, 67 years old, a senior fraud analyst who has spent decades spotting lies buried in numbers. Last night, after a 12-hour shift, I pulled into the driveway of my son's house, expecting nothing more than a hot shower and silence. Instead, I saw 3 suitcases lined up on the curb like discarded trash. My own luggage, left out for the neighbors to see. Taped to the handle of the largest case was a note in Tessa's neat handwriting. It read, "If you want to keep living here, the garage is available. Weatherproofed. Electricity included. We'll discuss rent later. Signed, your daughter-in-law." She made it sound practical, even generous, as if forcing a woman my age to sleep beside a lawnmower was just an efficient household arrangement. That note was supposed to humiliate me. It was supposed to push me to beg, to prove my gratitude. Instead, I felt something colder and sharper move through me. Rage didn't make me shake. It made me smile. Tessa thought she had caught me unprepared, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. I had seen this moment coming. Before the taxi even pulled to the curb, I reached for my phone and made the one call I had been waiting to make. Maple Court Residences. The voice on the line answered. I said calmly, "This is Beverly Reid, confirming my move-in tomorrow." As I stood there beside my bags, the house lights glowing behind the curtains, I didn't shed a single tear. Tessa believed she had won. She was already wrong. For years, I had worked as a senior fraud analyst at Horizon Community Credit Union, a job that trained me to see patterns in chaos. Numbers never lied, but people often did. I could spot when expenses didn't match income, when accounts were being skimmed, when someone lived beyond what the paper trail allowed. Those instincts never turned off. Not even at home. After my husband died, I moved in with my son Daniel and his wife Tessa. On paper, it was a simple arrangement. I paid $800 each month for room and board, money that covered more than just utilities. Quietly, I also filled gaps that no one noticed. I paid Ava's tutoring fees when the school account ran low. I covered Leo's dental bill when Daniel's insurance didn't stretch. I even took care of the electric bill one winter when Daniel was working overtime just to keep up. Yet Tessa acted as if my contribution was a burden. She handled the mail, sorted the bills, and always made sure Daniel believed money was tight. She carried herself as if every sacrifice was hers alone, while dismissing mine as trivial. To her, I wasn't Beverly the fraud analyst with decades of experience. I was just an aging guest taking up space. Still, I stayed quiet. I watched. Because one truth I'd learned from both work and life was this: when someone pushes that hard to control the story, it usually means there's something they desperately don't want revealed. The taxi rolled up just as I finished folding the cruel note into my pocket. The driver lifted my 3 suitcases into the trunk, and I slid into the back seat without once looking back at Tessa's shadow in the window. I had already arranged my escape weeks earlier. Maple Court Residences was ready for me. A clean apartment on the 2nd floor with nothing inside that she could touch or control. As the car pulled away from the curb, I let myself breathe for the first time in months. There was no scene, no shouting match, no begging for respect I would never receive. Instead, I left her with silence. That silence would be more unsettling than any argument. She expected me broken. What she saw was me leaving with a steady hand and a plan. Inside my purse, I carried something more powerful than anger copies of mail I had intercepted. Photographs of account statements, and notes about purchases that never aligned with the story Tessa told Daniel. I had learned long ago that evidence speaks louder than emotion. That night, from the quiet of my empty apartment, I sent Daniel one simple message. Tomorrow, check the mail. Look for an envelope from Capital First. Don't let anyone else touch it. It was a seed. Small but sharp. and it was about to change everything. At Maple Court, I began laying out the records I had collected. Years of work as a fraud analyst had trained me to build a case piece by piece. And now I treated Tessa's life the same way I would treat a suspicious account. First came the receipts. She claimed to be a freelance interior stylist. But the transactions told another story. Luxury cosmetics, spa treatments, designer boutique, and high-end restaurants. None of it fit her supposed business. A stylist building a portfolio didn't need recurring charges at day spas or 2-hour dinners at French bistros. The numbers told the truth she tried to bury. Next was the credit card in a name she had no right to use. Tessa had opened accounts using Reid, the last name of my late husband. Not her own maiden name. It was identity misuse in its clearest form. And Daniel had no idea those accounts even existed. One statement alone showed a balance of more than $8,000. Over 6 months, the combined debt reached nearly $2,300, all while she told Daniel the family needed to cut back. Then I checked her so-called degree. She loved to mention her business administration diploma from Ohio State. But when I contacted the registrar, there was no record of a Tessa Morrison or a Tessa Reid ever graduating. The paper credential she waved around was nothing but smoke. Finally, I built a timeline. I compared her purchases with the times she claimed to be home or working. The gaps were glaring. Hotel charges lined up with weekends. She told Daniel she was at her sister's. Gas receipts appeared in towns nowhere near our neighborhood. Every entry tightened the net. Evidence, layered and undeniable, was ready. Now Daniel just had to see it. 2 nights after I left, my phone lit up with Daniel's name. His voice was tense, as if he had rehearsed what to say but still wasn't sure how to begin. He told me that Tessa explained everything, that the garage had only been a temporary idea while they saved for a bigger house. The words tumbled quickly. Too quickly. The way they always did when my son was repeating someone else's script. I didn't argue. Instead, I asked one question that cut through his excuses. When was the last time he had looked at their household budget himself? The silence on the line stretched. He admitted he hadn't. That Tessa had always handled the bills. I let that sit. Then reminded him to check the mail for the Capital First envelope. An hour later, a photo appeared on my phone. It was a credit card statement with more than 8,000 inches charges. Designer stores. Restaurants he had never visited. Spa treatments he couldn't explain. I asked if he knew about the account. He didn't. That was when I planted the second seed. I told him to request Tessa's university transcripts. If her story was true, the registrar would confirm it. If not, he would finally see how deep the lies went. I didn't flood him with everything I had collected. Too much would only push him back into denial. I gave him just enough to make him doubt. Enough to make him start digging for himself. Before we ended the call, I told him the children were welcome to visit me any time. He said softly that he would look into it. For now, that was all I needed. The first crack had opened. It was a Saturday afternoon when I spotted her. Tessa stood by my car in the grocery store parking lot. Arms folded. Face tight with fury. She had been waiting. Probably following me. And she didn't bother lowering her voice when I approached. She accused me of poisoning Daniel against her. Of inventing lies to destroy her marriage. I kept loading my groceries into the trunk, steady and unshaken. The more I remained calm, the louder she became. Shoppers slowed their steps. Drawn to the spectacle, that was when her words betrayed her. She snapped that I didn't understand the money she spent, that every charge was part of building a business. I asked quietly, so only those nearest could hear. What kind of business required hotel stays and spa weekends? Her face flushed. Before she could regain control, I added the one line I knew would cut through her performance. Identity theft within families can be a federal crime. A ripple went through the small crowd. Tessa's bravado faltered, and she blurted out something about planning for assisted living in case I became a burden. I reminded her, still in that calm voice, that I had seen the list she made of fabricated incidents falls. Confusion. Memory lapses that never happened. The color drained from her face, just as a security guard, Mr. Alvarez, walked up. Other shoppers confirmed she had been the one shouting first. With the attention of strangers pressing down, Tessa sputtered but had nothing left to spin. She stormed off, trembling hands, fumbling with her keys. I stayed behind. The groceries secure. My composure intact. For once, she had unmasked herself without me raising my voice. The call came early the next morning. Daniel's voice was heavy, the kind that carried no sleep and too much shock. He told me that Tessa had come home after the scene in the parking lot, wild with accusations, screaming that I had humiliated her and ruined everything. By midnight, she was gone, taking 2 suitcases, a handful of jewelry, and every dollar she could reach. When Daniel checked the accounts at dawn, the savings fund was empty. $12,000. Money set aside for emergencies and the children's future had vanished in one night. He sounded crushed, but there was something else in his tone that caught me. Relief. For months, he had been torn between the woman he thought he married and the truth pressing at the edges of his vision. Now there was no denying it. The empty account spoke louder than any argument. He said it was almost a release, knowing for certain who she really was. No more wondering. No more excuses. Daniel changed the locks that morning and started gathering every document she had left behind. He said the children were confused, but he couldn't allow Tessa back in. Not after this. He admitted he had already spoken with a lawyer, and that custody would be his priority. Listening to him, I felt the weight shift. For the first time, Daniel was no longer defending her. He was preparing to protect himself and his children. Tessa's exit wasn't the end of the damage, but it was the beginning of his freedom. Daniel met with Cole Harmon, a family attorney who specialized in custody and elder rights. Together, they mapped the next steps with the precision of people preparing for a long campaign. Every scrap of evidence mattered now. I handed Daniel the packet I had assembled during those quiet months when Tessa thought I was just a tired old woman in the spare bedroom. Inside were photographs of credit card statements, copies of bills, and notes I had taken about her spending. I had logged dates, times, and inconsistencies, the same way I would document a fraudulent account at the credit union. Cole explained that Tessa's sudden disappearance, combined with financial fraud and abandonment, created a strong foundation for full custody. He urged Daniel to change every password, place fraud alerts with the credit bureaus, and secure the children's social security numbers from being misused. Daniel followed each instruction carefully, finally treating the family's safety with the seriousness it deserved. For me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure Ava and Leo would not grow up in the shadow of their mother's lies. The law could be slow, but evidence was steady. And this time, we had more than enough to show the truth. A week later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The words were short, but the venom behind them was unmistakable. "This isn't over. Beverly, you haven't won anything." The sender was Tessa. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message straight to Cole Harmon. He filed it into the growing stack of documentation that painted the real picture of her actions. For a woman who prided herself on control, Tessa had no idea she was handing us more proof every time she lashed out. Daniel read the message and shook his head. He told me he wasn't afraid anymore. He had locks changed, accounts secured, and the children safe under his roof. What once would have shaken him now only steeled his resolve. The court moved quickly once the evidence was presented. Tessa's absence from preliminary hearings, combined with the financial trail she left behind, worked against her. Temporary custody was granted to Daniel, with the expectation that full custody would follow. Her last threat had been meant to rattle me. Instead, it only confirmed what I already knew. She had lost her grip, and the final word would not be hers. 3 months later, the house no longer felt like a battlefield. Ava read her books at the kitchen table, while Leo built towers of blocks on the floor. Daniel cooked dinner with a steadiness I hadn't seen in years. And I set the table, part of the rhythm as naturally as breathing. There were still hard days. Of course, children asked questions. Court dates loomed, and money needed careful management. But the constant tension was gone. The silence in the house was no longer heavy, it was peaceful. One evening, after the children went to bed, Daniel looked at me and said he should have seen the truth sooner. I told him what mattered was that he saw it when it counted most. Back at Maple Court, I hung my framed certification from the credit union above my small desk. It wasn't just a reminder of my career. It was proof that evidence, patience, and dignity could dismantle even the cruelest lies. Tessa disappeared across state lines, leaving behind debts, frozen accounts, and a trail of fraud that would follow her for years. Daniel moved forward with divorce, and the court granted him custody of Ava and Leo, noting both her abandonment and financial misconduct. The children slowly adjusted, their laughter returning as the tension lifted from their home. Daniel regained his footing as a father, steadier and clearer than before. And I, Beverly Reid, found peace at Maple Court, certain that dignity and evidence had dismantled every false story. No one escaped the consequences. Justice, quiet but complete, prevailed. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.